the forgiveness that destroys a man. There are truths that most men never want to face, truths about love, about what should never be forgiven, and about the invisible line between compassion and self-destruction. We're taught that forgiveness is noble, that love conquers all, that patience is a virtue. But what happens when forgiveness stops being redemption and becomes a slow form of suicide? This isn't a text about hate. It's about limits. It's about what every man must understand before he loses himself completely inside a woman who has already stopped respecting him. There are gestures, words, and actions that are not mistakes. They are deliberate acts of contempt. And every time a man forgives one of those acts, he teaches the other person that his pain has no consequence. Forgiveness, when given to someone who doesn't change, is not love. It's permission for destruction. There are things that, once accepted, break the invisible structure that holds a man together: his dignity, his silence, his sense of justice. The first unforgivable act is systematic lying, the construction of parallel realities designed to keep you blind. It doesn't start big. It begins with small cracks. "I'm with a friend, I forgot to tell you." It's not a big deal. Lies disguised as details, hidden behind a smile. And when you least expect it, those cracks turn into chasms. The woman who lies without remorse doesn't lie out of fear. She lies because she has learned that you will stay. And every time you forgive, she redefines what's acceptable. The truth about chronic liars is that they don't lie to everyone. They lie to the ones who allow it. Because lying is a form of power. It's a way of controlling reality, of determining what you can and cannot know. A man who accepts lies is not being kind, he's surrendering his perception. And when you lose your sense of reality, you no longer love a person, you love an illusion. And illusions, no matter how beautiful, always collapse. The second unforgivable act is public humiliation disguised as humor. She laughs, makes jokes about your habits, your appearance, your ambitions. People laugh, and you laugh too, because it seems easier than confronting her. But each of those jokes is a dagger dressed in irony. Each one teaches others to see you through her mockery. This is not playfulness, it's contempt. And contempt is the first symptom of emotional death. When a woman treats your vulnerabilities as entertainment, what she truly wants is to erode your confidence. Because the man without self-esteem becomes easy to dominate, easy to manipulate, easy. Never mistake cruelty for honesty. There is no love in someone who publicly exposes you to feel superior. And when laughter becomes a weapon, silence becomes self-defense. Here is the truth. Once a person starts mocking you in public, the relationship is no longer about love. It's about dominance. And love cannot exist where there's hierarchy. Here is the depth of men, where silence becomes reflection, and forgiveness stops being virtue and becomes survival. The weight of emotional manipulation. Emotional manipulation is one of the most sophisticated forms of cruelty, and one of the hardest to recognize. It doesn't come in screams or threats. It comes wrapped in tears and phrases that sound like love. "If you really loved me, you would. You're cold, you don't care. After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me?" Manipulators are emotional strategists. They study your fears, your guilt, your desire to protect. They know exactly which strings to pull to make you react the way they want. And they always disguise it as affection. But the truth is, someone who truly loves you doesn't need to control you. Love doesn't demand obedience, it invites trust. When someone turns your compassion into a leash, what they want isn't love, it's submission. There's a kind of woman who uses her fragility as a weapon. She cries not because she's hurt, but because she knows that every tear disarms you. She threatens to disappear, to get sick, to collapse, because she knows that your instinct to protect will make you surrender. And once she sees that power working, she'll never stop using it. Emotional blackmail isn't affection, it's terrorism. It destroys slowly, not through blows, but through confusion. You stop knowing if you're being cruel or cautious, if you're being distant or simply saying. And that's how they win, by making you doubt your own perception of reality. No love should require walking on eggshells. If you need to measure every word out of fear of emotional explosion, what you're in is not a relationship, it's captivity. The fourth unforgivable act is the violation of your privacy disguised as care. She goes through your phone because she loves you. She asks for your passwords because there should be no secrets. She checks where you are just to make sure you're safe. But safety isn't control. Love isn't surveillance. And transparency doesn't mean exposure. When someone invades your privacy, what they're really saying is, I don't trust you, and I don't believe you deserve autonomy. And there's no dignity where there's no space to be yourself. Privacy isn't about hiding things. It's about maintaining identity. Because even in love, you need a place that's yours, a corner of your mind that no one has the right to enter. The one who violates that space isn't protecting the relationship, they're slowly killing it. The man who allows constant inspection becomes a prisoner of insecurity, not his own, but hers. And there's nothing romantic about living under suspicion. You can't build peace under surveillance. And you can't call it love if it feels like a checkpoint. Here is the depth of men, where control is unmasked, and love is redefined not by how much it demands, but by how much it allows you to remain yourself. When love turns into competition, love dies when admiration turns into rivalry. There's a kind of woman who doesn't want a partner, she wants an opponent she can secretly beat. At first, she admires your strength, your determination, your confidence. But over time, that admiration transforms into silent resentment. She begins to see your stability not as inspiration, but as a reminder of what she hasn't achieved. And so begins the invisible competition. Every success of yours becomes an affront. Every accomplishment, an unspoken threat. Instead of supporting you, she starts to sabotage you subtly. I wish you were home more often. You're obsessed with work. You think you're better than everyone else. These aren't random complaints. They're strategies to make you shrink. Because if she can make you feel guilty for growing, she doesn't have to confront her own stagnation. Competition in relationships isn't always about money or status. Sometimes, it's about emotional dominance. She wants to be the one who matters most, who decides what's right, who defines the moral high ground. And if she senses that you're emotionally independent, she'll start to undermine you, not through confrontation, but through subtle erosion. She'll begin rewriting the narrative of your relationship. You've changed. You used to be more humble. You don't listen anymore. Little phrases, like drops of acid corroding the bond one comment at a time. A man doesn't notice this immediately. He starts to over-explain himself, to apologize for things that aren't wrong, to justify his ambition as if it were a sin. And little by little, his fire dims. The worst part? She'll say she loves you while doing it. Because in her mind, love is about possession, and the only way to truly possess someone is to make them smaller. The relationship becomes a battlefield disguised as affection. You stop being lovers and become opponents. Two people trying to prove who's more right, more moral, more wounded. No relationship survives that kind of war. Because love cannot breathe in an atmosphere of comparison. A man who's constantly defending his worth stops creating. He lives reacting. And when a man reacts instead of leading, he loses himself. The woman who turns love into competition doesn't need your defeat to win. She only needs you to stop being yourself. That's why this form of relationship is one of the most dangerous. It doesn't destroy you violently. It kills you through fatigue. And when you finally leave, she'll say you abandoned her, not realizing that she was the one who walked away first, the moment she began seeing you as a rival instead of a partner. If this resonates with you, stay close to Depth of Men. We talk about what most people avoid, the quiet deaths that happen inside relationships, and how a man can rise from the ashes without losing his soul. Betrayal of presence. There are betrayals that don't involve other people, only absence. The kind of absence that's felt even when she's right next to you. Her body is there, her voice is there, but her attention belongs to something else. Her phone, her image, her reflection in the digital mirror. In modern relationships, presence has become rare. We live surrounded by devices that simulate connection but drain attention. And nothing destroys intimacy faster than the feeling of being invisible next to someone you love. When a woman stops being present, she starts living inside her own projection. Every photo, every story, every moment becomes less about sharing and more about validation. And the man beside her becomes a background element, a silent witness to a play where he's no longer part of the script. It starts subtly, a dinner interrupted by constant notifications, a date where she's more interested in framing the perfect picture than actually living the moment. You laugh together, but her eyes are already elsewhere. You try to talk, but she's already planning the next post. Presence is the foundation of intimacy. Without it, love turns into performance. And in performance, there is no truth, only audience. The worst part is that this absence is socially rewarded. She posts a quote about self-love, and people applaud. She captions a photo with something like, "He makes me feel safe." And you smile, even though you know she hasn't truly looked at you in days. Digital affection becomes emotional currency, traded for likes, attention, and validation. But affection online doesn't heal absence offline. The betrayal of presence is the most subtle because it looks innocent. She hasn't cheated. She hasn't left. She's still here. But in truth, she's already gone, replaced by her own projection. This kind of relationship creates a special kind of loneliness, the loneliness of proximity. You can touch her, but not reach her. You can talk, but not connect. You begin to feel unnecessary, like furniture in the house of her image. And yet men stay. Because leaving someone who's physically there but emotionally gone feels absurd. You keep hoping she'll return, not from another person, but from her own reflection. But she won't. Because once someone starts feeding on external validation, they forget how to digest real intimacy. They stop needing connection, they just need attention. And no man can compete with the world's applause. If she needs an audience more than a partner, she doesn't want love, she wants worship. And love cannot survive in the temple of vanity. Here, at Depth of Men, we speak about this modern tragedy, the slow death of presence in the era of constant connection. Because sometimes, the most painful betrayal isn't when she touches someone else, it's when she stops touching your soul. The woman who punishes with silence. Some wounds don't bleed. They echo. And there's a kind of punishment that doesn't come in words or shouts, it comes in silence. It's the silence that chills the house, that turns every gesture into a threat, that makes you question whether existing is already a mistake. There are women who don't argue, they withdraw. They disappear inside themselves and leave you suspended in uncertainty. You ask, "What happened?" And they reply, "Nothing." But their silence screams louder than any insult. This is emotional starvation, the slow withdrawal of affection as a means of control. They know exactly what they're doing, withholding warmth, touch, attention, until you start begging for them again. It's not absence, it's strategy. A man who falls into this dynamic starts to internalize guilt. He apologizes for things he didn't do, becomes hyper-aware of every gesture, every phrase, every sigh. He starts to believe he's the problem, because her silence always implies that he is. This silent treatment isn't passive, it's aggressive in disguise. It's a way of asserting power without taking responsibility. Because when there's no confrontation, there's no accountability. And when there's no words, the man has no way to defend himself. Every day becomes a test. Will she talk today? Will she smile? Will she touch me again? And every small display of affection feels like a reward, a temporary reprieve from emotional exile. That's how manipulation turns into dependence. The silence becomes addictive, because its end feels like peace. And the man starts chasing that peace, not realizing he's chasing approval. A relationship where communication becomes punishment is not love, it's emotional conditioning. It's the same logic used to train animals: punishment for disobedience, affection for submission. And no man remains whole after long exposure to this. Because silence doesn't just isolate you, it rewires you. You stop expressing emotion, fearing it'll be used against you. You censor yourself. You shrink. Eventually, you start mirroring her. You become quiet too, but not out of control, out of survival. The tragedy is that she'll tell others that you're distant, that you've changed, that you're emotionally unavailable. And maybe you have, because she killed the part of you that wanted to reach out. A relationship like this doesn't end with a scream. It ends in silence, the same silence that began it. The man who learns to find peace in the absence of connection has already begun to die emotionally. He becomes a ghost, living in the ruins of a love that only speaks through punishment. At Depth of Men, we expose the quiet violences, the ones no one talks about because they don't leave marks. But silence can kill more than words ever could. The disguise of moral superiority. There's a particular cruelty in the woman who disguises her control as virtue. She doesn't shout, doesn't accuse, doesn't insult. She simply acts like she's better. Everything she says comes with a tone of moral high ground, a posture of righteousness that makes you question yourself even when you know you're right. She's mastered the art of subtle domination through guilt. Every disagreement becomes a lecture, every mistake an opportunity for her to teach you. She never apologizes, she reflects. She never hurts you, she reacts to your lack of awareness. She never criticizes, she wants to help you grow. It sounds enlightened. It sounds evolved. But underneath that polished language lies the same old poison, control. Because in this game, she's the saint, and you're always the one in need of fixing. No matter what happens, you'll always be the one who hasn't understood yet. This type of woman uses intellectual and emotional sophistication to establish hierarchy. She doesn't dominate through chaos, she dominates through logic. She makes you doubt your perception, but instead of confusion you feel guilt, because she sounds right. This is the tyranny of reason without empathy. She speaks about emotional maturity, while using your vulnerability as evidence of your inferiority. If you express anger, she calls it aggression. If you express sadness, she calls it immaturity. If you express detachment, she calls it ego. In the end, there's no emotion you can express without being corrected. And that's how she wins, not by breaking you, but by convincing you that breaking is proof you need her guidance. This dynamic destroys a man's self-trust. He begins to overanalyze every reaction, to translate every feeling into language that might sound acceptable. He no longer speaks, he negotiates permission to feel. The relationship becomes a classroom, and she's the teacher. You're no longer a man, you're a project, a student, a soul in constant need of refinement. And the most perverse part: society applauds women like this. They're seen as emotionally intelligent, wise, self-aware. But behind closed doors, their partners walk on eggshells, afraid to say anything that might sound unevolved. It's psychological imprisonment in the name of enlightenment. True wisdom doesn't humiliate. True growth doesn't require submission. And true love doesn't use virtue as a weapon. A man who lives with someone who's always morally superior eventually loses his instinct. He stops trusting his intuition, that raw, silent wisdom that tells him when something is wrong. And when a man stops listening to his own intuition, he becomes easy to control. The most dangerous prisons are the ones built out of good intentions. And the cruelest chains are the ones disguised as emotional awareness. At Depth of Men, we strip away the moral theater and expose what's really underneath, not righteousness, not enlightenment, but the fear of losing control. Abandonment disguised as freedom. Not every absence is physical. Sometimes the person is still there, sleeping beside you, answering, smiling mechanically, but something inside them has already left. And it's in that kind of emptiness that a man loses himself most deeply, in abandonment disguised as freedom. The woman who emotionally disconnects but stays out of convenience turns the home into a desert. Gestures become automatic, conversations shallow, touches devoid of soul. She says she needs space. Bad she doesn't want to feel suffocated. Bad she's going through a phase. But the truth is simpler and colder. She no longer sees the relationship as a connection, only as a routine to be endured until a new emotion appears to replace it. This is the cruelest form of withdrawal, because there's no confrontation, no rupture, no explanation. Only a gradual distancing that makes you doubt yourself. You feel something is wrong but can't name it. You try to get closer, and she drifts further away. You ask questions, and she responds with short, neutral, calculated phrases. The man begins to internalize that he's the one failing, that he's not enough, that he's become boring, predictable, ordinary. He doesn't realize that he's not being replaced by someone else, but by her own apathy. And apathy is a form of cruelty. It says, I could love you, but I choose not to. She stays, not because she wants to, but because it's convenient. And that's the slowest kind of death, being tolerated by someone who once desired you. When love fades, but the bond remains, a strange theater begins. Both play their parts, dinners, photos, conversations, but the essence has evaporated. The home becomes a museum of gestures that once meant something. A man senses this intuitively. He doesn't need confessions or explanations. He feels it in the air, in the pauses, in the way she says, "Good night," without looking at him. But he stays. Because leaving feels like failure, because the emptiness of solitude seems worse than the void of cohabitation. So he adapts. He starts walking on tiptoe around the ghost of what they once were. He tells himself, it's just a phase. He starts collecting small signs of affection like crumbs, a kiss, a touch, a brief smile, as if they were proof that something still exists. But they don't. Because love isn't measured by gestures, it's measured by presence. And when presence disappears, everything else is just nostalgia pretending to be affection. This is the kind of abandonment that doesn't end with a goodbye. It ends with emotional erosion. And when he finally wakes up, when he finally decides to leave, she'll say, "You gave up on us." No. He didn't give up. He simply stopped begging for something that was no longer there. The truth that no one likes to face is this: sometimes the person who left you did so long before you realized it. And you spent months, even years, trying to resuscitate a corpse. At Depth of Men, we talk about these silent goodbyes, not to make you bitter, but to remind you, when someone stops showing up emotionally, the most dignified act of love is to stop waiting at the door. The price of staying. Every man reaches a point where he must make a choice, to continue pretending or to finally walk away. But leaving isn't just a physical act, it's a spiritual one. It means detaching from the illusion that love can survive without respect, honesty, or reciprocity. We've been conditioned to believe that endurance equals strength, that staying is proof of maturity, of loyalty, of love. But sometimes staying is the most cowardly thing you can do. Because it's not always bravery that keeps you there, it's fear. Fear of loneliness. Fear of judgment. Fear of confronting the emptiness that will come after. Fear of realizing that all the effort you invested was for something that no longer exists. And so you endure. You endure the coldness, the manipulation, the silence, the control, the contempt, convincing yourself that every relationship has its ups and downs. But what you're living isn't a phase. It's decay. Every time you accept what should be unacceptable, you become smaller. You stop speaking. You stop dreaming. You stop existing in your own story. You don't realize it, but you've started to disappear. The man who stays too long begins to confuse suffering with purpose. He starts to think that love is supposed to hurt, that pain is proof of depth. But love isn't supposed to crucify you. Real love is a place of peace, not penance. There's a moment, and every man knows it, when your body feels what your mind refuses to admit, that you can't go on. Your sleep becomes restless. Your chest feels heavy. You start carrying anxiety like a permanent shadow. You've entered the last stage of emotional exhaustion, the one where you start mourning someone who's still alive. Leaving, then, becomes not an act of abandonment, but of self-rescue. It's not about giving up on her, it's about reclaiming yourself. Because staying in what destroys you doesn't make you loyal. It makes you complicit. And every day you remain silent inside a relationship that humiliates you, you're teaching her that your soul is negotiable. Freedom doesn't come when the door opens, it comes when you stop waiting for permission to walk through it. Walking away is not the end of love. It's the end of illusion. And only when illusion dies can love, real love, for yourself and for life, begin again. So, to every man standing at that threshold, hesitating between staying and leaving, remember this. Peace is not found in her return, it's found in your decision to stop returning to what breaks you. Here, in Depth of Men, we don't glorify detachment, we sanctify clarity. Because a man who learns to leave when his soul is being drained doesn't become colder, he becomes wiser. And wisdom, in the end, is just this, knowing the difference between fighting for love and fighting for the right to keep suffering.